Hello, hopefully this will come up for you guys. I um will just check the volume on various things, so just give me a sec. Hello, hopefully this will come up for you guys. I will just check the volume on various things, so just give me a sec, guys. Cool. It sounds like the sound's coming through in those places. So, what I was going to do today is go through some sort of top tips for people that are going through their MCI, which is the Mountaineering and Climbing Instructor walls. But some of these might be of help for people going through their RCI or just, their ML and stuff. But it's going to be very specific to the MCI award. It's the award that I hold for teaching multi-pitch rock climbing in the UK. It has over the years seemed to become more and more tricky for people to pass. It's down to I think a 70% failure rate on people's first attempt. So people don't pass first go. They often get deferred on a day or they fail the whole thing. I think the actual overall kind of fail and you have to do the whole assessment again is fairly low, but loads of people end up kind of being, having to come back for a day's reassessment. And so a few years ago, there was an effort to um, address this by setting up people that were official mentors for the Association of Mountaineering Instructors. Because I'm not working, I really haven't worked in the UK for a couple of years because I've been working down south. I'm no longer a member of AMI, so I'm not an official mentor, but the sort of things that I learn and that I taught will still be of use to lots of people that are going through the scheme. So let's see whether we can. I might need to make this a little bit bigger so it's readable. So effectively, what I would do when I was mentoring people, I would charge a day's work because just if I don't charge a day's work, then it is work for me. But I would go out for a day, and kind of that day's work would give them a sort of access to me moving forward as a mentor. But I didn't want to just mentor anybody, and I much prefer when people have paid that they're a little bit more inclined to turn up and do things. I have had lots of issues with people not turning up. Um, and so basically, we would go out, and I'd get them to say, right, we got like 3/4 of a day, and to do something. And so I'd ask them, what do you want to cover? There are basically 5 days when you come on to your assessment: a personal rock climbing day, an improvised rescue day, a teaching climbing day, a scrambling day, and then a half day of navigation. And so I would say, what do you feel is your weakest point? Let's go out, let me observe that, and I will give feedback. And so I would often go out and we'd try and get back for or bit down for the cars for 2 o'clock. So then we could go to a cafe or somewhere and we would go through this process. So I would give them the feedback. And so this is a little bit like that kind of performance profiling, but you're kind of having to do a little bit more yourself, which hopefully when somebody's going to become an MCI, it's quite a high level, and hopefully you should be at level to be able to critically think about your own performance and things. And so I've put this is like a little I think there's an Excel and numbers. I think it's just Excel because that will open anywhere. But it just sort of like the personal rock climbing day. The purpose of this is really they just want to make sure people can climb, but also highlights, your gear placements, your belay management, your personal climbing technique, your risk management, how you access and egress crags, and your route choices. And so, if you like, it's what we're wanting to see is what the assessors are wanting to see. Sorry, is you being a normal climber. Um, there aren't necessarily, a climber, an instructor way of climbing. If you're a climber, you're a climber. And so basically, what they really want to see is that you can be extremely competent at climbing VS. I often suggest to people you want to be climbing HVS and above, because really what you want to be able to do is to climb that grade at an easy level. Um, I talk about, you want to be making like these first time nut placements. You're meant to be an instructor. If you can't like look at a hole, and I kind of explain it to clients when I'm teaching it, is like you want to look, measure twice, cut once, as the old carpenters say. So, look at a crack, then look at it again, decide exactly where in the crack it's going to go, and make placements. You want to have good climbing technique. Excellence is what I used here. Use appropriate tactics for climbing. You show that you can use a guidebook. Show that you have effective. You can make belays effectively, and that you can have your stance management is good. Um, and hopefully, most people that are going through the MCI awards, they tend to be climbers. So this should be like your bread and butter. So 9 times out of 10, the personal rock climbing day is dead. It should be dead easy for you. What I will add is that if on your assessment it's a wet day, you are going to be climbing in the rain. So um, you need to go out in bad weather. And actually, it's the worst bit of my job is having to climb in the rain. There are certain crags in North Wales that loan themselves to climbing in the wet. Others do not. Traumatic isn't very good in the wet. It's good to avoid the rain. The Mulwins is good. It's got very sharp edges. It's quite clean. Some of the stuff in Comidwell is so well used that it doesn't get covered in lichen, so that's quite good. So again, just knowing where to go, and again, if you remember the other thing about, I put this thing up about I think it was yesterday. I know I don't think I've done it, but you have like your client, the weather, the where you're going, the task you set, and the aim that the client has. And often we have to choose, the weather will direct to where we go, the crag that we go to. So having a kind of a model to um, having a model to where the best crags are for that day. So the next bit is, again, this is often one of the areas that people can find quite hard, which is the improvised rescue day. And basically what the assessor is looking for is that you have the skills to generally avoid minor and major issues. But effectively, if the worst happens, you have the ability to uh, rescue people with a solution. Now, they're not wanting to see a set piece. They're not going to go to you, right? I want you to uh, escape the system, go down, and they're just going to set scenarios. So, what often helps is if you can chat to people about what scenarios they've had in assessment, what scenarios they've seen, what scenarios they've heard of. And so often we talk about like these what minor issues, which could be somebody's tied into a belay and they can't undo the carabiner that the clovitches is on. What do? You're at the top of a pitch, they're at the bottom. That's a minor issue. What happens if they get a foot stuck in the crack? Does it require you to abseil down, or can you get them to take the shoe off? There are lots of there are easy problems and there are hard problems, and often these there's the one of where if we use two ropes, sometimes we use them in series so that you have a client on the end of your rope, and then a rope between the first client and the second client. And when they're climbing up, they can inadvertently clip one rope over the other and create a knot. Again, being able to spot that and prevent it happening is more important than being able to sort it out afterwards. We then want you to have an awareness of the major issues that can happen, and generally trying to avoid them. But effectively, you're going to have to be competent in in hauling, escaping the system to an ab or a counterbalance, rescuing people from a traverse or a lead climb, or dealing with a multi-pitch descent with a client. And so if these are things that you want to focus on, then you kind of just write them down in here, and we'll go in a little bit more. I'll just try and add a few things to this. Teaching rock climbing. Again, we just want to see that somebody turns up on the day and you have somehow assessed where they're at, decided what you're going to teach them that, get them to show that they've learned, maybe teach something else. When I was mentoring some people, I tried to explain that realistically, you've got to be doing at least 4 pitches a day teaching. Otherwise, there's not much you can do. One of the big mistakes people make is they spend, half an hour to an hour on the ground, just basically throwing them Libby Peters' rock climbing book at them on the ground, and it's like, that's not going to work. What we need to do is, get them and get them onto something, get them moving, find out where they are through questioning. You get like 15 minutes in the morning, so it's again, your questioning technique is really important, and I've got some stuff on that where we talk about using TED questions, which is rather than ask like open, what to do, how to do, open questions, you use can you tell me, can you explain, can you describe? So TED, tell, explain, describe. And if you get them to use, if you use that vocabulary, it makes for a much longer, more in-depth answer. So yeah, so TED questions are quite good for that. So this first bit of analyst of clients' needs, you can ask some questions, but actually the first pitch is maybe making sure that what they say is in line with how they are. I think Dr. House MD, everybody lies. That is very apparent when you teach rock climbing. It's a general rule of thumb. Some people will, explain that they'll tell you the hardest grade they've ever climbed, and some people will tell you the kind of grade that they think they're happy climbing now. And both, one's underestimated their ability, one's overestimated. So often we have to do that. We then kind of, you should have the bus journey there to sort of rapidly plan your day around those needs. Think about what you're going to teach, what crag, and even what routes. And so if you watch my reflective practice video, I talked about after each route, you writing down what that route would be good for, what the stance is like, because when you're starting out, you're not going to remember everything. When you've been, when I've been, like a lot of people like myself that have lived and worked in North Wales, I've been an MCI since 2006. I've been climbing here since 95. I've got a pretty good idea of what the crags offer. I can sometimes even walk up to, go to a belay, and I know exactly what size nuts I need because I've used it that many times. A lot of people, you need to have a variety of lessons. Now, often what I do with my clients, and I'll do this, put it up on a later date, it's on a different computer. I create like a wall of skill. So I get them to kind of write, what would you teach on a 1-day course? What do people need to do? They need to be able to put a harness on, tie in, belay, understand the basics of equipment, and basic technique. And then, within a week, you probably want to be teaching people how to make belays, how to belay from the top of the crag, how to place gear, how to climb multi-pitch routes. So, within a week, we can take people on a week-long course from potentially never having climbed again to having led a multi-pitch route at like diff or V-diff. And to me, it doesn't matter the grade. These people have had their first adventure in climbing. And so we need to be able to teach everything. And so I often get people to do this wall of skills and build it up to, what do you need in the first day, the first week, the first year. and ongoing to be an instructor and lifelong progression, and um, just having just spending a bit of time thinking through what you can teach. And then we've got, you know, route choice. Are you having people in series or parallel, which is, again, MCIs will understand that. It's sometimes it's easier to teach people how to kind of switch leads in series rather than parallel, but sometimes it's just you might need to like get to the top quickly, so we switch to parallel, and you want to be able to switch between the two. Um, Sometimes I will use shorter pitches, uh, so I get more pitches at a climb, because actually often the starting thing is getting people to make belays and bring somebody up, and then they, you know, and go through the process, gets them to do lots and lots of, you know, so if I get 4 pitch route and I break it into sort of 6, they've had 50% more trial and error, you know, or more coaching on belay management. Um, there's this whole idea that um, when you leave a belay or when the client reaches a belay, you've got with the first 30 foot of the route to teach something, because beyond 30 feet, the client can't really see and you can't really hear. So you want to give them something to focus on the climb that's dead simple. Could be like a technique thing, it could be looking at the gear, doesn't matter. You give them one thing to focus on, and then as they're coming up, when they're 30 foot below you, you could maybe give them something else, or you can coach them a little bit more. Again, this thinking of one thing on each pitch, uh, for them when they leave and for you when you get there, is kind of helps you address like less is more. You don't want to be one of these people throwing, you know, the Libby Peters book at them, because they'll be overwhelmed. I'll do a whole coaching one, but there's this concept that you can process up to 7 ± 2 chunks of information. And when people are starting out, they find it hard to chunk. So everything you throw at them is broken down. You kind of want to be some coaching in climbing and tactics. Again, I think I make a lot of my money by getting my clients to answer 2 questions. And this is a big tactical thing, you know, especially when I'm teaching people to perform better, is where are you going to place your next run, and where are you going to stand next in balance? And if you can get those two to align, so you can stand in kind of balance and place gear, then you're a winner. And then the other thing is to just look at how you are, you know, you've got to manage your clients to and from the crags. Now, because we're using multi-pitch crags, a lot of the time this can be, you know, getting to complex sea cliffs, getting to or from big mountain crags. So again, it's up to you. So um, I never got round to these with my other. These are the ones that most of my clients wanted to look at. The scrambling one. It's not just your ability to guide, you know, grade 3 scrambles. It's the ability for you to swap between everything and manage everything safely. And actually, the reason that the scrambling day is there as well, in part, is, you know, if you've got difficult access and egress issues to the crag, then actually we will be expecting you to use some short roping. So for instance, if you went and did your rock climbing teaching on Idwal slabs, the chances are that you've got to short rope or scramble off. And often I will explain to people that if I've guided up teaching people the basics of climbing and they've been on the blunt end of the rope, then I will short rope them off. If I've actually got my clients leading up the slabs, when we get to the top, I might come out of the system and get them to rope up and get them to actually kind of scramble up themselves. But in the scrambling day, what we're looking for is that you can navigate to the base of the route, you can identify the route from your guidebook, that you can choose an appropriate method for the terrain. And often with scrambling, you'll do some short pitching, but then you might take effectively what we call take the rope for a walk. So it might look like we're moving together, but actually we're just walking on, you know, steep terrain with a massive fall below us. So, you know, if we're right on the edge, then we might sort of like not move together, but sort of concertina. So one will go up, the other one will join. And we might just stop if it's a big path, but in a serious place, we are literally just taking the rope for a walk. And you need to be able to uh, decide what terrain you're in and how you're going to manage it and do that effectively. The big things that people often miss is if you come up to a ledge and you belay right on the edge and you got two people, you get one person up there, you don't know what to do. But if you had gone up and belayed back here, there would have been enough distance to get two people onto the ledge. So it's really good to practice bringing two people up. Now, how I do this, or how I encourage my the people I was mentoring, was I'd either put a knot in front of me or I'd tie in and have a trail behind me. And if they didn't, if they hadn't accounted for that issue, then they end up in a bit of a sticky situation later on. And so, again, what we're looking for isn't necessarily like a lightning fast, what if you hear about proper guides, big G guides in the Alps, they are against the clock. They need to get people up and down a mountain before the sun comes out and things start falling off. There is no Serac above us. What we are looking for, though, is a nice, what we would call fluid journey. So we're not looking for the same stop start that you would get on a rock climb. We're looking for kind of like quick belays, rapid belays, quick turnovers, and moving as quickly as possible. A big overlooked area is obviously most people think about scrambling up, but what about scrambling down, and how we can manage that. And then finally, and this is one that a lot of people overlook, because it's a half a day navigation, and they don't really go into it, but people think it's, if this is the ML level, the MIA must be up here. And it's like, no, the level is here. We can't make you navigate to a lesser point. The points have to be findable, and they're findable often through differences in contours. But what we want you to be able to do is get to those way more quickly and efficiently than somebody on an ML would be. So basically, you're displaying a higher level of cognitive understanding. You're rapidly getting there, but you'll also be able to pick somewhere, or show that you could pick a point to go to that would teach a specific aspect of navigating. So tick off features, or aiming off, or anything like that. And so, basically, I think on my assessment, I got 3, maybe 4 points to navigate to. Of like, I think there was only 2 or 3 or 4 people on that day. I can't remember exactly, but what would you teach and how would you teach it, and stuff like that, because again, it is an instructional award. Having done that, what I suggest to people to do then is to think to themselves, maybe you're totally competent in this, but actually you might want a little bit of work on your stance management, because and effective belays, because this is going to help your climbing day. And maybe so what you might do is put stance management. What you want to do here is write down what it is, where you are, and what you feel your problem is, or how you think you can improve. How you're going to improve that. So being quite specific. So if you remember, I think I've done one on ghost setting, where you want something sort of like objective, strategic, and tactical. This is about you giving a process. And what's really important here is how many days. So if in here it was, lead, stroke, traverse, rescue. This is a really complex skill, and you might be still a little confused. Need to dial it in. And so basically, you might be wanting to, walk practice on a slow walkthrough. Oh, no. Um, become, just lots of repetition without mistakes. Um, and stance management, you might get away with if you're going out and doing like an 8 pitch route, you might need 1 day to work on it. This might take 4 days because actually, if you focus on a slow walkthrough and then you get your training partner to do it, then you know you still need to go back at it and repeat it over and over and over to really ingrain it in you. Another really good one is things like that is just to see all the skills, is to actually teach them. And what helps, I think, when you teach, and you're not going to teach everything. Like if I go back to here, if I do a day's teaching, I might cover hauling, escaping the system to maybe either an ab or a counterbalance. I won't do both. I basically limit what I'm teaching. But one of the things that teaching these complex skills to experienced climbers will be is they will come up with the most common mistakes, which will help you avoid that common mistake when you're going for your assessment. And hopefully you won't, hopefully in teaching that you'll get a much better understanding of it because you're having to think through it like somebody without too much experience. And so what you would do is go through this and you'll end up with like the number of days, and you'll be able to, like, you might find that using series and parallel actually works in with stance management, because how you would manage the stance is going to be different. And so you might be able, this might be 1 day, but actually you could combine these 2 days together. So you could do stance management and using series and parallel. And so what this process really does is help you to focus on what you really need to focus on. There is a fundamental thing with a lot of people is a lot of people get very good at what they're good at, and what they don't get good at is what they're not good at, because actually what they're not good at is what they don't enjoy. And so what they want to um, what they want to what they focus on is what they enjoy. So often this will pick out those weaknesses in your armor, and effectively what we're wanting to see in somebody who's going for their MCI, or even like there's the RCI, which is the sort of the single pitch rock climbing instructor, and now there's the RCDI, which again is basically teaching leading outdoors on a single pitch crag. Now I have once gone to, well, not once, a couple of times I've been over to like gritstone edges teaching lead climbing. Terrifying. Terrifying. The ground's never more than 30 feet away. People place a gear, make a move, and you think, well, they're going to hit the ground. And so these things are very serious. What we teach, or where we teach, the environment we're teaching has inherent risks, and often the reason that these assessments are so in depth is that we want to avoid the worst thing happening to people. Now, this is it's not my opinion. This is something that came up on. I used to work for an American company, and we used to teach a lot of ex-military in the army. They were all in if you're a veteran in the US, you get something called the GI Bill. If you've been a frontline serving infantry soldier, it was put in place during Vietnam because they needed more GIs to go serve and they needed a motivation. So it would allow them to go to college. I worked for a company that set themselves up as a college to teach people to be climbing instructors. And what we found is that a lot of the people we were working with were struggling with sort of what might be called leadership. And one of the things we felt was that people weren't really being that, they were focused on themselves rather than like other people. And so we kind of looked at ways we could do it. And so we came up with this idea of looking at like emotional intelligence. And so if I can find where my emotional intelligence talk is, there we go. It's a way of helping you with the interpersonal or more cognitive side of teaching. People used to call it soft skills, but I think it, with all of the rote work and stuff being the hard skills, but they aren't, soft skills make them sound easy to master. They are not. They take as much effort as anything else. So we talk about emotional intelligence has 5 things. So this is just the basic introduction I would give, which is like, you need to have some self-awareness, self-control, empathy, relationship building, and motivation. Now, particularly for me, the relationship building and empathy are really good because actually you're working with other people, and if you can't understand where they are, then you aren't going to connect with them, or you're not going to hit the nail on the head. So here, self-awareness, ability to know one's emotions, strength, weakness, drives, values, goals, and recognize their impact on others, while using gut feelings to guide decisions. So some people could be very aware of how they are around people. Some people aren't. So the next one is self-control, involve controlling or read disruptive one's disruptive emotions and impulses, and adapting to changing circumstances. Now, what this is I would describe this as we have the limbic brain, the old brain, and the new brain. If you like, it's the chimp paradox. Covers this in much more details, but we will often react emotionally with our gut before we have analyzed the whole situation. And so we sometimes need to slow ourselves down and think about, right, let's think about this before we react. Empathy is considering people's feelings, especially when making decisions. Empathy is walking in somebody's shoes, and then managing relationship building is about managing the interpersonal relationship between you and the client, so that you can get the best out of them and they can have a good time, and then obviously motivation. So self-awareness, these all of these things, like our emotions, what strengths and weaknesses we have. If we have a strength, then we can work with it, but if we have a weakness, it's sometimes best to work on that so that it's no longer a weakness. And all these things will impact how we react to people. The self-control is again can be, I had a situation. I've had situations when I was away this winter where I didn't. I reacted with my gut rather than my brain to my boss when he said something to me, and I wasn't very pleasant to him. We kissed and made up. Um, but yeah, the empathy thing is like, so this is a simple scenario that I gave to people. You're heading to simple sports venue, you're the instructor, but you've got two students. You know, if you can play a role, so often we would get people to role play with this. So we would, one person would be student one and they would want to lead 6B, but your climbing partner is only how you feel frustrated having to deal with the weakest member of the group. Um, and student two's feels intimidated because he's holding this person back. And so the idea is you ask them questions, and to show that you've understand, you you parrot back. So if this person said, yeah, I really want to climb 6B, but uh, we've got this guy who's struggling to climb 5A, so I'm feeling a little bit frustrated that we've got this weak person. So you might go back to me and say, so basically you're telling me that you're frustrated because we've got this person that's weak, and what you want to do is do this. Now, if I told you that what we could do is it's a single pitch venue, like moving a rope between a 6B and a 5 isn't going to take very long, and actually, you know, you'll belay them and they'll belay you. So you're going to have to take it in turns anyway, and you're going to need a rest between each climb. You've acknowledged that you've heard them, and you've come up with a solution. But more than just coming up with a solution, you want to acknowledge that you've heard them, and that's showing empathy. You can then, uh, this relationship building. Hopefully, if you do this, and you will realize that it will help with relationship building. But often the biggest problems in this whole teaching people is when there's a miscommunication, uh, or there's discrepancies between what people want to do and stuff like that. I mean, I can give a great example. Was I was working once for a well-known centre. The guy who is involved in this is on my friends list in Facebook, so I'm not going to mention him. We've since become friends, but I was teaching him, and he's like, I've soloed this route 20 years ago, and just he shot up this route, and I couldn't keep up because I was on a fixed line trying to teach him, and all I'm doing is throwing in wires below him. And I got back, and I'm like, I'd been trying to explain to him like what we're doing it was like a 4-week climbing course, and to me, I'd like to see him show me how he led on this route, and then we would have moved up through the grades. But I tried to explain to him like, this is the starting point. This is like day one of you leading on this course, and we need to develop trust and stuff like that. He was like adamant he didn't want to do it. I got back to the center. He'd gone to see the manager. I'd already seen the manager and just gone, yeah, I don't know what's going on with this guy, but I can't teach him. And it was the one time that I was just like, I just didn't know what to do. Um, I gave the scenario. This is really interesting. I gave the scenario when I was teaching these Americans. And one of the things that I had mentioned in the scenario was I had, at some point, he'd got his rack out, and I said, we can't use that rack. You use mine, because it was a course, and his rack it was a lot of hexes on rope, totally fine. But they were all over 10 years old, and I was just like, well, it's not ideal. And so as we were on doing this kind of course, developing these Americans, one was like that, well, what you've just done is that rack was my child, my youth. It was what all my climbing memories were based around. And it was quite interesting hearing somebody else take him in a scenario and actually hear different ideas. And it was, and since then I can remember I had an interview for a job, and I had to fly back into the UK to just for this interview, and I had nowhere to go. And I've been in the back of my van, and this guy's just like, "Come to my office, have a shower. If you need a shirt, I could give you a shirt," and was so nice about it. Uh, yeah. So yeah, just be aware that um, there are some less than you know we often call them we might call them soft skills, but they are like interpersonal skills. And hopefully on another one of these I'll go through like a bit of the coaching process. So there is like a book online that we can that I wrote years ago, but for me it'd be quite interesting to see how people enjoy the the kind of this is what I would call the kind of these are skills that are quite hard to teach on a 9 day course. Often what happens, I think, nowadays is when I did my MCI, I had done my ML in 97 and my RCI. I had worked a fair bit with my ML and a fair bit with my, like, loads with my rock climbing instructor. I'd done like thousands of indoor climbing sessions. And I think a lot of people now, they kind of, they get their ML, they kind of claim that they've done the days working because they've guided some friends post their assessment, but they haven't done, you know, a year or two of actual just working with normal people and going and seeing all of the issues that can come up when you're working with real people. And actually dealing with people is one of the aspects of the job that is quite hard to cover. But if you start just go for me, the this empathy thing of just trying to think about how that person might be feeling. Is this their first route? If it's their first route, they're going to be like eyes out on stalks potentially. So yeah, hopefully that'll finish there for today. I've got a few other things I can talk about in the future, but that was just a little bit of a rundown for people who are maybe getting to going to their MCI or want to, or if you're looking for help at the moment, like the reason I'm doing this is, I'm away injured. I did walk up Mole Shabad yesterday. It took me quite a long time to walk up Mole Shabad, um, and I'm in a fair bit of pain today as I kind of just recovering. But one of the things I did really enjoy was mentoring people, and so if you see this and you've got this far and you actually would like some mentoring, then you could either talk on one of these things. I think I'm streaming these to my YouTube channel, here on Facebook and Twitch. But yeah, I only doing uh, those things for here. So thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's any subjects you'd like me to cover, then again you can just mention. Ta-ta for now.